I'm standing in the lobby of First Union Bank on Broad Street, wearing jeans I've worn 3 days straight and a cardigan with a hole in the sleeve, when a woman in a navy suit tells me I'm about to inherit nearly $900,000 from a dead woman who loved me. I don't believe her. I tell her she's made a mistake. She asks me to sit down. She asks if I'm sure I don't know what this is about. I'm shaking so hard I can barely hold the pen to sign my name, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. Let me show you how I ended up here, looking like someone who crawled out of a life that broke her into pieces, sitting across from a banker who thinks I'm confused or lying or both. 6 weeks ago, I was going through old photos in a shoebox from the closet. It was summer in Richmond, Virginia, the kind of heat that makes everything slow down and the fan spins all day, barely making a difference. My duplex had thin walls and a shared driveway, and I could hear my neighbor's television through the plaster while I sat on the floor surrounded by pictures of a marriage I no longer recognized. The carpet beneath me was worn thin, the pattern faded from years of footsteps that had once meant something. Dust motes floated in the afternoon light, filtering through Venetian blinds I'd been meaning to replace for 3 years. My hands were sticky from the humidity, and every photo I touched left fingerprints on the glossy surface. I had to keep wiping my palms on my robe. I remember the weight of each photograph as I lifted it. Our wedding day, me in a dress I'd sewn myself because we couldn't afford anything else. Him looking at me like I was everything. A vacation to Virginia Beach. The last time I could remember us laughing together. Really laughing. The kind that comes from your belly and makes your face hurt. Christmas mornings, birthday dinners. Moments frozen in time that felt like they'd happened to different people. That's when I found it. Folded between a photo of our wedding day and one of us at Virginia Beach, smiling like we meant it. A bank statement, not one of ours. A transfer for $15,000 to an account number I'd never seen before. Dated 3 months earlier. My husband's signature authorization at the bottom. The paper was crisp, official, recent. Not yellowed like the photos, not faded. Fresh, real, undeniable. I sat there on that floor in my royal purple robe that I wore every morning even though it was past noon, holding that piece of paper, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call him at work or throw his things in the yard or do any of the things you see in movies when a woman finds out. I just folded it back up, put it exactly where I found it, closed the shoebox, pushed it back onto the closet shelf. Because somewhere deep in my body, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I already knew. Not the specifics, not her name or what she looked like or how they met. But I knew the way you know when winter's coming even before the temperature drops, when the air changes and something in your bones tells you to prepare. He'd been different for over a year, distant, distracted, his phone always face down, his explanations too detailed, too perfect. Working late became working weekends, became working trips I couldn't verify. But it wasn't just that. It was how he looked at me, or rather, how he'd stopped looking at me. Like I was furniture in a house he was already planning to leave. The money had been disappearing for months, maybe longer. I just hadn't put it together until that moment on the floor. Bills that didn't make sense, credit cards I didn't open, a second mortgage on a house we were supposed to own outright. Every time I asked, he had an answer. Bad investments, the economy, my lack of understanding about how finances worked. And I believed him because it was easier than facing what I think I already knew. By the time I found that statement, we were drowning. The duplex was 3 months behind. Creditors called 6, 7, 8 times a day. I stopped answering the phone, stopped checking the mail, stopped pretending I could fix what was breaking all around me. I'm 46 years old. I worked as a medical billing clerk for 18 years until the company downsized, and my position became 3 part-time workers with no benefits. My savings went to keeping us afloat while he promised things would get better. Every dollar I'd put aside over decades, gone. My credit destroyed by accounts he opened in my name. My name on a foreclosure notice for a house I'd never agreed to remortgage. I had nothing, no money, no credit, no options. 46 years old, and I couldn't even afford to leave. In the kitchen, a pot of collard greens simmered low on the stove, filling the rooms with steam and the smell of something familiar. Gospel music played low from the radio like it always did when I was alone, because the silence in that house had become unbearable. On my bed, folded at the foot, was the quilt her grandmother made. I slept under it every night, even in summer, because it was one of the few things that still felt like love. Maybe you're wondering why I didn't confront him, why I didn't grab that statement and shove it in his face and demand answers. But what would that have accomplished? He'd lie. He'd deny. He'd turn it around somehow and make me question what I'd seen. Or worse, he'd admit it. And then what? I had nowhere to go. No money to hire a lawyer. No family to take me in. My mother died when I was 19. My father remarried and moved to Arizona, and we talk maybe twice a year. I was alone in every way that mattered. So I played a different game. I pretended I knew nothing. I smiled when he came home. I asked about his day. I ironed his shirts and put dinner on the table and acted like the woman who didn't know her life was a lie. And while I pretended, I started looking. Not for evidence, I had that. I started looking for a way out that didn't exist. I thought about my godmother a lot during those weeks. She'd been dead 12 years by then, passed away before my whole life fell apart, and sometimes I wondered if that was mercy. That she didn't have to see me like this, didn't have to know that the girl she'd invested so much love in had ended up here, in a dying marriage, in a dying house with nothing to show for 2 decades of trying. Her name was Dorothy Chambers, but everyone called her Miss Dot. She wasn't actually my godmother in any religious sense. She was my mother's best friend from childhood, the woman who held my mother's hand when I was born, who showed up at every birthday and graduation, who treated me like the daughter she never had. She worked as a cleaning woman her whole life, 3rd shift in office buildings downtown, riding 2 buses each way, sending money back to family in North Carolina. I remember specific moments with her now, fragments that shine brighter in memory than they did when they were happening. The way she'd arrive at my elementary school concerts, smelling like Pine Sol and lemon cleaner, still in her work uniform because she'd come straight from her shift. How she'd sit in the back row and clap louder than anyone else, her hands rough and cracked from chemicals, but her smile absolutely radiant. I remember her teaching me to make cornbread when I was 10, her patient voice explaining that you had to heat the cast iron skillet first, had to make it so hot the batter would sizzle when it hit the pan. That's the secret, she'd said, her hands guiding mine. You got to commit to the heat, can't be timid about it. I remember the summer I turned 16 when my mother got sick, really sick, before anyone knew what it was. Miss Dot showed up every single day after her night shift. She'd sleep a few hours on our couch, then wake up to help with meals, with laundry, with keeping me fed and clothed and getting to school. She never complained, never acted like it was a burden, just showed up, day after day, doing what needed to be done. She was my favorite, though she never said it out loud, but I knew by the way she showed up when nobody else did. The way she listened without judgment when I needed to talk. The way she looked at me and said, "Baby, you deserve better," even when I didn't believe it myself. When she died, she left me nothing. She had nothing to leave. She'd worked for 43 years cleaning other people's offices and died in a rented room with $14 in her checking account. I paid for her funeral with money I borrowed from my husband, back when things between us were still good, back when I thought love meant something, but I kept her memory close anyway. I talked to her sometimes when the house got too quiet, when the weight of everything pressed too hard. I'd ask her what I should do. She never answered, but I kept asking. It helped somehow, imagining what she might say. The call came on a Tuesday in late July. I was at the kitchen table with a stack of bills I couldn't pay, trying to figure out which ones absolutely had to be handled and which could wait another month. The phone rang and I almost didn't answer because I assumed it was another creditor. But something made me pick up. My hand trembled as I reached for the receiver. I'd developed this physical response to phone calls, this immediate spike of anxiety that made my heart race and my palms sweat. Every ring felt like an accusation. every call a reminder of how far I'd fallen. "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than I meant it to, defeated before the conversation even started. A woman's voice, professional and slightly confused. She said she was calling from First Union Bank about an inactive account. I almost hung up. This was it. Another scam. Another person trying to take what little I had left. "I'm sorry, you have the wrong number," I said, already pulling the phone away from my ear. "Wait, please," she said quickly. "Is this?" And she said my full legal name. Not the name I went by. My full, complete legal name, including my middle name, Marie, that I never used. That I'd only used on official documents. That most people didn't even know I had. I froze. "How did you get this number?" "Ma'am, I'm calling from First Union Bank. We've been trying to reach you about an inactive account in your name. Can you verify your date of birth for me?" I gave it to her, my voice shaking now for different reasons. This didn't feel like a scam anymore. It felt real, disturbingly, confusingly real. She asked if I'd ever lived at an address she then read off. My old apartment from when I was 23, before I got married, before anything fell apart. An address I hadn't thought about in over 2 decades. An address that existed before credit card debt and foreclosure notices and marriages that died slowly in the dark. She said there were unclaimed funds in my name, that I needed to come in to discuss the account, that it was time-sensitive. I told her again she must be mistaken. She insisted. She gave me a reference number and an appointment time and said to bring identification. I hung up, thinking it was a scam. One of those things where they get you into a bank to steal your identity or sell you something. But the woman had known too much, details I hadn't thought about in decades. That night, after my husband went to bed, I searched. I went through boxes I hadn't opened in years, storage bins from the basement, old files from when my mother died. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Just something that connected to that old address, that bank, that version of me that existed before this life swallowed her whole. I found it at 2 a.m. At the bottom of a drawer in the spare room we never used, underneath old tax returns and expired warranties. A manila envelope, yellowed with age. Savings bond certificates rolled up in a rubber band. My name typed on them in that old-fashioned typewriter font. Dates from 1992, 1993, 1994. Purchase amounts of $50 here, $100 there. And tucked inside, a note in Miss Dott's handwriting on a piece of notebook paper. Just 7 words. For when you need to be free. I sat on the floor of that spare room holding that note, and I cried harder than I had in years. Not because I understood what it meant yet, but because she'd thought about me. Because somewhere in those years of working nights and riding buses and counting every dollar, she'd put something aside. For me. With my name on it. Like she knew. Like she saw something coming I couldn't see yet. The appointment was for Thursday at 2. I told my husband I had a dentist appointment. He barely looked up from his phone. I dressed in the best clothes I had left that still fit, jeans without holes and a cardigan that was only slightly frayed at the cuffs. I brought the envelope with the bonds, 3 forms of identification like the woman said, and a hope so fragile I was afraid to acknowledge it. The bank was downtown, a building I'd walked past 1,000 times without really seeing. The lobby was all marble and brass, the kind of place that made me feel small and out of place. I gave my name to the receptionist. She made a phone call, then asked me to wait. The woman who came out to get me was the one I'd spoken to on the phone. Mid-50s, kind eyes, navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. She introduced herself as Patricia Morgan, assistant branch manager. She led me to a private office with a door that closed and windows that looked out onto Broad Street. Her heels clicked on the marble floor as I followed her. I was acutely aware of how I looked in that space. My worn jeans against the polished elegance, my frayed cardigan among the expensive suits. I felt like an imposter, like someone would realize I didn't belong and escort me out. The office was beautiful. Rich wood desk, leather chairs, framed certificates on the walls. Everything about it screamed success and stability, things I couldn't even remember feeling anymore. Patricia gestured to one of the chairs across from her desk. The leather was buttery soft, probably cost more than my entire living room set. She asked to see my identification. I gave her my driver's license, my social security card, my birth certificate I'd had to dig out of storage. My hands shook as I passed them across the desk. She studied each one carefully, her expression neutral but focused. Professional. I watched her eyes move across the documents, checking details, comparing information. Then she made a phone call, spoke quietly to someone I couldn't hear, just fragments of sentences. Yes, she's here. I verified. I think we need you for this conversation. My heart hammered. What was this? What had I walked into? A few minutes later, a man in his 60s came in. Silver hair, expensive suit, the bearing of someone used to authority. The branch manager. He introduced himself as Robert Chen and shook my hand like I was someone important, not someone who'd shown up in jeans with holes. "Ms. Parker," he said, his voice gentle but serious. "Thank you for coming in today. I know this must be confusing." They asked me to sit down. Patricia poured me a glass of water from a pitcher on her desk. Mr. Chen settled into the chair beside Patricia's, forming a united front across from me. They asked if I understood why I was there. I shook my head. No, not really. I just got a call about an inactive account. But I don't have any accounts here. I've never banked at First Union. They looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Mr. Chen nodded slightly. Patricia opened a folder on her desk. She explained that the bank had been trying to reach me for over a year, that they'd sent letters to my old address, made phone calls that went unanswered, that the account in question had been inactive for over a decade and was flagged for esquittement, which meant it would eventually go to the state if I didn't claim it. She showed me paperwork, documents with my name, that old address, dates from the early 90s. She explained that someone had opened a certificate of deposit in my name, that it had matured years ago but was never claimed, that it had been sitting there, accruing interest, waiting. I asked who opened it. She checked the paperwork. Dorothy Chambers, it said, listed as account administrator until her death in 2002, at which point full ownership transferred to me. My throat closed. I couldn't speak. Miss Dot. She'd done this. Somehow on a cleaning woman's salary, she'd done this. I asked how much. My voice was barely a whisper. I didn't actually expect it to be significant. Maybe a few $100s. Maybe 1,000 if I was incredibly lucky. Enough for first month's rent somewhere. Enough to give me breathing room for a month or two. Patricia looked at me for a long moment, like she was trying to gauge whether I could handle what she was about to say. Mr. Chen leaned forward slightly, his expression careful, concerned. Then Patricia turned a piece of paper around so I could see it. The number at the bottom, $892, $467, $83. I stared at it. The numbers didn't make sense. They were just symbols on a page, abstract, meaningless. $892,467.83. I read it 3 times, 4 times. The digits didn't change. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded strange, detached, like it was coming from somewhere else. "That can't be right." "I assure you it's correct," Mr. Chen said gently. "The account has been accruing compound interest for over 20 years. Miss Chambers was very specific about the investment strategy. Very strategic. $892,000. Numbers that large didn't belong next to my name. People like me didn't have numbers like that. People like me had negative numbers, debts, foreclosure notices, not nearly $1 million. I said there must be a mistake. They had the wrong person. Someone else with my name. Something. The branch manager leaned forward. He said very gently that there was no mistake, that they'd verified everything, that the account was mine, had always been mine, was set up specifically to transfer to me upon Miss Chambers' death. that it had been growing for over 20 years, and I was the sole beneficiary. I put my head in my hands and I sobbed. Right there in that office with these strangers watching. I sobbed so hard my whole body shook. Patricia brought me water. The branch manager closed the door for privacy. They gave me tissues and waited while I fell apart. Not because of the number, though that was impossible to comprehend, but because she knew, somehow Miss Dot had known, that I might need this someday, that I might need a way out of something I couldn't escape on my own. And she'd built it for me in secret, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice, loving me enough to protect me from a future she'd never see. I thought about all those nights she'd worked, all those buses she'd ridden, all the things she'd gone without, and she'd done it for me. A girl who wasn't even her blood, who she had no obligation to save. She'd seen something in me worth protecting, and she'd done it the only way she knew how. When I could finally speak, I asked what I needed to do. They explained the process, that I'd need to file paperwork, provide documentation, work with their legal department, that it would take a few days to process everything, but the money was mine. All of it. No taxes, since it was in a CD that predated certain regulations. Clean, clear, mine. I asked if anyone else could claim it, if my husband could claim it as marital property. Patricia said no. The account was established in my name alone before my marriage. It was separate property, completely protected. I signed papers. I barely remember what they said. My hand shook so hard I could hardly hold the pen. They made copies of my identification, set up a new account in my name only at a different bank where the funds would be transferred, gave me a number to call if I had questions. When I stood up to leave, my legs almost gave out. The branch manager steadied me, asked if I was okay to drive. I said yes, even though I wasn't sure. I made it to my car in the parking garage. I sat there for, I don't know how long, just breathing, just existing in this new reality that had appeared out of nowhere. I thought about calling someone, but I had no one to call. So I sat there alone with the biggest miracle of my life and nowhere to share it. I drove home in a daze. The duplex looked exactly the same. My husband's truck in the driveway. The grass too long because we couldn't afford the lawn service anymore. Foreclosure notice still taped to the door. Except now everything was different. I had options. I had power. I had a choice. I didn't have 6 hours ago. I went inside. My husband was on the couch watching television. He asked how the dentist was. I said fine. He didn't look away from the screen. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. I pulled out Miss Dot's quilt and wrapped it around me even though it was 90 degrees outside. And I talked to her, told her thank you, told her I was sorry it took so long to find what she'd left. Told her I finally understood what she'd been trying to tell me all those years ago when she said I deserved better. I didn't tell my husband. Not that night, not the next day. I played the same game I'd been playing, pretending I knew nothing, pretending everything was fine. Except now, I was pretending with nearly $1 million in a bank account he didn't know existed. I spent 3 days researching. I went to the library and used their computers so there'd be no trail on our home internet. I looked up divorce lawyers who specialized in financial abuse. I looked up domestic violence resources even though he'd never hit me, because I was starting to understand that there are different kinds of violence. I looked up apartments in different neighborhoods, different cities, places I could disappear to and start over. I found a lawyer who offered free consultations. Her name was Sharon Reeves. She worked with a nonprofit that helped women escape financially abusive situations. I called her from a payphone outside a gas station because I didn't trust my cell phone anymore. I told her everything. The transfers, the hidden debt, the accounts in my name I never opened, the foreclosure on a house I didn't know was remortgaged, the bank statement I'd found, the inheritance I'd just discovered. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "He's been systematically destroying your financial identity to keep you trapped. This is textbook economic abuse, And honey, that inheritance is your way out. But we have to be very, very careful about how we handle this. She explained that I needed to protect the money immediately. Move it to a bank he didn't know about. Never mention it. File for divorce citing abandonment and financial abuse. Get a protective order if needed. Document everything he'd done. Build a case. She said, "He's going to fight you. When he finds out about the money, he's going to claim it's marital property. He's going to try to take half. But that account predates your marriage, and it's in your name only. He has no legal claim to it. As long as we're smart about this, he can't touch it." I met with her the following week, signed papers, started the process. She warned me that I needed to plan my exit carefully, that I should have somewhere to go before I told him, that men like him don't handle rejection well, especially when there's money involved. I found an apartment across town, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, good locks, landlord who didn't ask too many questions. I paid first month, last month, and security deposit in cash from a small withdrawal I'd made. I didn't move anything there yet, just secured it, just made sure I had a place to land. The day I told him, I'd already moved my important documents. Miss Dot's quilt, my mother's jewelry, photos I couldn't replace. I'd packed them in garbage bags and taken them to the new apartment over 3 days, a little at a time, while he was at work. I'd rehearsed what I would say, standing in front of the bathroom mirror at night while he slept, practicing the words until they felt solid, until they felt like something I could actually speak out loud. I know about the money. I want a divorce. Simple, direct, no room for negotiation. But when the moment came, my carefully rehearsed words evaporated. It was a Saturday morning. I made coffee like normal, the ritual so automatic my hands knew the movements without thought. Measure the grounds, pour the water. Wait for the machine to gurgle and drip. He was on the couch like normal, phone in hand, barely acknowledging my existence. Some game show played on the television, canned laughter filling the silence between us. I carried my coffee to the living room, sat down in the chair across from the couch, not next to him like I used to. We hadn't sat close in months, maybe years. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up from his phone. "About what?" My hands tightened around the coffee mug. The ceramic was hot, almost burning, grounding me in the moment. "About us. About what's been happening." "Nothing's happening," he said, still scrolling. "You're being dramatic again." I set the coffee mug down on the table between us, pulled the bank statement from my pocket where I'd been carrying it for weeks like a talisman, unfolded it carefully, placed it on the coffee table where he couldn't avoid seeing it. "I know about the $15,000. I know about her. I know about all of it." The change was instant. He went very still, his thumb frozen mid-scroll. The phone lowered slowly. His eyes found the bank statement, then me, then back to the statement. Then he laughed, actually laughed. The sound was harsh, dismissive, designed to make me feel small. "Are you serious right now? You're going through my things? That's what we're doing now?" "You hid it in a shoebox of our photos," I said quietly. "I found it by accident." "There's nothing to find because nothing's going on." His voice rose, indignant, offended. "You're being paranoid. This is insane. You're acting crazy." The word hit me like it always did. Crazy. The label he'd been using for months whenever I questioned anything. Whenever I asked about missing money or strange charges or late nights at work. Crazy, paranoid, dramatic, words designed to make me doubt my own reality. But this time I had proof. This time I wasn't crazy. I said nothing, just looked at him, waited. He stared at the bank statement for a long moment. I watched him cycle through emotions like channels flipping on a television. Shock, anger, fear, calculation, looking for an angle, looking for a way to spin this. "It's not what you think," he finally said, his tone shifting, softer now, reasonable. "She's just a friend. From work. She was in trouble, needed help. I gave her a loan. She's going to pay it back. $15,000, I said. To a friend. She needed it. We needed it. We're 3 months behind on rent. Creditors are calling 8 times a day. We have a foreclosure notice on the door. It's complicated. You don't understand how these things work. Then explain it to me. I kept my voice level, calm, even though everything inside me was screaming. Explain how we can't afford groceries, but you can give $15,000 to a friend. He stood up, started pacing. This is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. I want a divorce. The words came out clear, final, exactly like I'd practiced. He laughed again. Said, with what money? You can't afford to leave. You need me. I said, I have a lawyer. I have an apartment. I have everything I need. He stood up, started pacing, said, you can't do this. This is my house too. I'm not going anywhere. I said, it's in foreclosure. We'll both be out in 60 days anyway, but I'm leaving now. That's when he got scary. Not physically, he never touched me. But his voice dropped low and he said, you'll never make it on your own. You'll come crawling back, and when you do, I won't be here. I picked up my purse and my car keys. I said, goodbye, and I walked out. He called 63 times that day, left voicemails ranging from apologetic to enraged. I didn't answer any of them. My lawyer had told me not to engage, so I didn't. It took him 4 days to find out about the money. I don't know how. Maybe he went through my things. Maybe he hired someone to follow me. Maybe he got lucky. But suddenly, the calls changed. Suddenly, he had a lawyer too. Suddenly, he was talking about community property and marital assets and his right to half of everything. His lawyer sent a letter demanding financial disclosure. My lawyer sent back a letter explaining that the inheritance was separate property established before marriage. His lawyer argued that it didn't matter, that anything acquired during marriage was community property regardless of source. We went to court. Temporary restraining order hearing first, because he'd started showing up at places he knew I'd be. The grocery store, the library, my new apartment building's parking lot. Never threatening, just there, just watching, just reminding me he knew where I was. The judge granted the restraining order. 500 feet. No contact except through attorneys. Then came the financial hearing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, institutional and cold, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. I sat at a table with Sharon while my husband sat across the aisle with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed man in an expensive suit who looked like he ate opposing parties for breakfast. His lawyer tried every angle. He stood up, his voice confident and accusatory, painting me as a manipulator, argued that I'd hidden assets, that I'd committed fraud, that the timing of the discovery was suspicious, that I must have known about the account all along and just waited until the marriage was ending to claim it. Your Honor, he said, his tone suggesting this was all so obvious, so clear-cut. We're talking about nearly $900,000 that the petitioner conveniently discovered the moment she decided to end this marriage. The timing is more than suspicious, it's calculated. I felt my face burning, felt everyone's eyes on me. The way his lawyer said discovered, with air quotes in his voice, made it sound dirty, like I'd committed a crime. Sharon stood up. Her voice was calm, professional, unshakable. Your Honor, if I may address these accusations directly. The judge, a black man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on his nose, nodded. Please do. My lawyer presented the documentation methodically, building her case piece by piece. The death certificate showing Miss Chambers died in 2002, 12 years before this moment. The bank records showing the account had been inactive since her death, untouched, forgotten. The certified letters the bank had sent to my old address trying to locate me, returned as undeliverable because I'd moved years ago. The phone logs showing when they'd finally reached me. the paper trail proving I'd had no knowledge of the inheritance until the bank finally reached me by phone. She presented my financial records showing years of debt, of struggle, of barely surviving. "If my client had known about this account," Sharon said, her voice sharp now, cutting, "does the respondent honestly believe she would have allowed herself to fall into foreclosure? To destroy her credit? To live in poverty for years?" The judge reviewed everything. Papers rustled as he flipped through the documents. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, could feel my husband's eyes burning into the side of my head. The judge removed his glasses, looked at my husband's lawyer, looked at my husband, then looked at me for a long time. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes felt kind, understanding. "This is separate property," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "The account was established prior to marriage, funded entirely by a third party, and maintained separately throughout the marriage. The respondent has no claim to these funds. None." Furthermore, he looked directly at my husband now, his voice hardening. "The financial records show a pattern of economic abuse, secret transfers, hidden debts, credit cards opened fraudulently. The petitioner is entitled not only to her inheritance, but to full protection from any further financial manipulation." My husband's face went purple. He stood up and started shouting, called me a thief, called me a liar, said I'd manipulated everything. The bailiff had to escort him out of the courtroom. Afterward, in the hallway, my lawyer hugged me. She said, "You did it. You're free." But I didn't feel free yet. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like I'd won the battle, but the war wasn't over. He tried everything. He told people I'd stolen Miss Dott's money, that I'd manipulated a dying woman into giving me her life savings. He called my old job, my friends, anyone who might listen. He spread rumors that I'd been planning this for years, that the whole marriage had been a con. Nobody who mattered believed him, because anyone who'd known Miss Dott knew she barely had enough to survive, knew she sent money back to family, knew she'd never had savings to steal, and anyone who knew me knew I'd been blindsided by the inheritance as much as anyone. The truth came out eventually, the way truth does. A woman he worked with came forward, said she was the one the $15,000 went to, that he'd promised her he was leaving me, that he'd been stringing her along for 2 years with promises and stolen money. She showed text messages, bank transfers, promises he'd made and broken. She said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was stealing from you. I thought the money was his." I believed her. She was young, early 20s, didn't know any better. He'd played her the same way he'd played me, just a different game. The divorce was final 6 months later. He got nothing. I kept the inheritance, kept my car, kept my freedom. He disappeared after that. I heard he moved back to West Virginia where his family was from. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know. I stayed in Richmond, though. This was my city. I'd lived here my whole adult life, and I wasn't going to let him take that from me, too. The apartment I'd rented was supposed to be temporary, but I stayed for a year. I needed time to adjust, to understand what it meant to have money, to not panic every time I bought groceries or paid rent, to sleep without dreaming about foreclosure notices. I thought about Miss Dott constantly during that first year, about all the nights she'd worked while I slept, about all the sacrifices she'd made that I'd never known about how she'd loved me quietly, practically, building a safety net I didn't know existed until I needed it most. I went to her grave for the first time since the funeral, brought flowers, sat on the ground next to her headstone, and talked to her like I used to in my kitchen, told her everything, about the marriage ending, about finding the money, about being saved by someone who'd been dead 12 years. I said, "You knew, didn't you? You knew I'd need this someday, and you prepared for it even when I couldn't see it coming." A woman was visiting a nearby grave. She overheard me talking. When I stood to leave, she stopped me, said, "I'm sorry for eavesdropping, but did you say Dorothy Chambers?" I said yes. She smiled, tears in her eyes, said, "She cleaned the building where I used to work. She was always so kind. She talked about you all the time. Her girl, she called you. She was so proud of you." I asked what she remembered. She said, "She worked so hard. Double shifts sometimes. She said she was saving for something important, but she never said what. She said someday you'd understand." We stood there together, two women who'd been touched by Miss Dott's love. And I realized I wasn't the only one. That she'd impacted so many lives in quiet ways that nobody noticed until they were gone. That conversation changed something for me, made me understand that the inheritance wasn't just money. It was responsibility, a legacy. Miss Dott had spent her life helping people, and now she'd given me the resources to do the same. I started researching nonprofits, organizations that helped women escape abusive situations, that provided financial counseling and legal services and housing assistance. I wanted to understand how the system worked and where the gaps were. I spent weeks at the library, reading everything I could find. Reports on domestic violence, studies on economic abuse, statistics that made my stomach turn. I printed articles and highlighted sections and filled notebooks with facts that felt like they were describing my own life. One statistic stayed with me. Nearly 98% of domestic violence cases involve some form of financial abuse. 98%. It wasn't rare. It wasn't unusual. It was the norm. And yet nobody talked about it. Not the way they talked about physical abuse. Financial abuse was invisible, silent, socially acceptable in ways that left bruises nobody could see. I started calling organizations, asked them what they needed most, what kept them up at night, where the system was failing. The answers were consistent and heartbreaking. "We turn away 10 women for every one we can help," one director told me. "We just don't have the resources. We can offer counseling, we can offer support groups, but when a woman needs money to actually leave, first month's rent, security deposit, money to disappear, we have nothing for that." Another told me, "The women who make it out are the ones with family who can help, with friends who can loan money, with some secret resource they've been hiding. The ones who have nothing, they stay. And sometimes they die staying." What I found broke my heart. So many women trapped the same way I'd been. No money, no credit, no options. Staying in dangerous situations because leaving seemed impossible. And the resources available were stretched so thin, turning away more people than they could help. I thought about how close I'd come to being one of those women who never made it out. If Miss Dott hadn't saved for me, I'd still be in that duplex, still married to a man who'd stolen my future, still believing I had no options. The inheritance hadn't just saved me, it had given me a miracle. And miracles shouldn't be necessary for survival. I met with Sharon Reeves, the lawyer who'd helped me, asked her what was needed most. She said, "Emergency funds. Women who need to leave right now but can't afford first month's rent or a security deposit. Women who need to hire a lawyer but can't pay the retainer. Women who need to disappear for their own safety but have no money to do it." So I started a foundation, named it the Dorothy Chambers Freedom Fund, set aside $500,000 as the initial endowment, created a board of directors made up of women who understood what we were trying to do, lawyers, social workers, formerly abused women who'd made it out. The foundation would provide emergency grants, no questions asked, no bureaucracy, just help when it was needed most. $5,000 to escape, $10,000 to start over, whatever it took to save a life. We helped our first woman 3 months after launching, a 32-year-old mother of 2 whose husband had isolated her completely. No job, no family, no bank account in her name. She'd called from a gas station payphone because he monitored her cell phone. Her voice was shaking so hard I could barely understand her. "I need to leave tonight," she'd said. "I have nowhere to go. I have $83 and 2 children, and if I go back to that house, I don't know what he'll do." We met her at a women's shelter 2 hours later. She was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall, with 2 little girls clinging to her legs, 6 and 8 years old, wide-eyed and silent in the way children get when they've learned that being seen is dangerous. She had 1 garbage bag with clothes for all 3 of them. That was everything she'd managed to grab. Sharon came with me. We sat down with her in a private room at the shelter and explained what we could do. We gave her enough money to move 3 states away, where she had a cousin who'd agreed to help. First and last month's rent, a used car so she could get to work, get the kids to school, lawyers' fees for emergency custody, money for groceries, for school supplies, for everything they'd need to start over. She cried so hard she couldn't speak, just held my hands and sobbed. Her daughters cried too, not understanding what was happening, but feeling their mother's relief, her hope, the first breath she'd taken in years that wasn't weighted down by fear. 3 days later, they were gone. Disappeared into a life he couldn't track, couldn't find, couldn't destroy. She sent me a letter 6 months later, forwarded through Sharon's office so there'd be no return address that could be traced. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, like she'd written it several times to get it right. "You saved our lives," it said. "My children are safe now. They're in school. They're laughing again. I have a job, we have a home, we're building a new life. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but thank you. Thank you for being the miracle I prayed for. Thank you for understanding that sometimes people need help right now, not next week or next month. Thank you for seeing us, for believing us, for giving us a chance to be free." That letter sits framed in my apartment, a reminder of why I'm doing this. We've helped 43 women in 2 years, 43 lives changed, 43 futures that look different because Miss Dot worked those night shifts and saved those dollars and loved me enough to plan for my freedom. I moved last year, finally bought a house of my own. Small, 2 bedrooms, in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. My name on the deed. No husband to steal it, no bank to foreclose. Just mine. I furnished it simply. Miss Dot's quilt on my bed, my mother's jewelry on my dresser, photos of people I've loved on the walls. It feels like peace. I work part-time now, medical billing from home, just enough to stay busy. The rest of my time goes to the foundation. I interview grant applicants. I review applications. I make sure the money goes where Miss Dot would have wanted it to go. I still talk to her. Every morning over coffee. Every night before bed. I tell her about the women we've helped, about the lives we've changed, about how her love keeps multiplying, spreading out in circles she never could have imagined. Sometimes I wonder what she'd think if she could see all this, if she'd be proud or embarrassed or shocked. But I think I know. I think she'd just smile that quiet smile she had and say, "That's good, baby. That's real good." My husband remarried. I heard it through someone who knew someone. Married the woman he'd given the $15,000 to. They have problems already according to the rumors. Money problems, trust problems. The kind of problems that start when a relationship is built on lies. I don't feel satisfaction about that, just sadness. Sadness that some people never learn, never grow, never understand that love isn't about taking, it's about giving, about protecting the people who matter even when it costs you something. I went back to school last semester. Business administration. I'm 48 years old taking classes with kids half my age, and I love it. I'm learning how to run the foundation properly, how to scale it up, how to help more women. One of my professors asked me what inspired me to start the foundation. I told her about Miss Dot, about the inheritance, about being saved by someone who'd been gone 12 years. She said, "That's a beautiful story. Your godmother must have been an incredible woman." I said, "She was. She really was." But the truth is more complicated than that. Miss Dot was incredible, but she was also ordinary. She was a cleaning woman who rode the bus and lived in a rented room and had very little in the way of material possessions. What made her incredible wasn't what she had. It was what she did with it, how she chose to love, how she chose to protect. I think about that a lot now, about how we measure a life. We talk about success like it's money or status or possessions. But Miss Dot died with $14 in her checking account, and she changed my life more than anyone ever has or probably ever will. She taught me that love is practical, that it's not just feelings and words. It's actions and plans and sacrifices made in secret. That real love prepares for the worst while hoping for the best. That real love protects beyond the grave. The other day I got a call from a woman in North Carolina. She said she was Miss Dot's niece, that she'd heard about the foundation through family. She said, "Aunt Dorothy talked about you all the time. She said you were the daughter she never had. She said you were going to do something special with your life." Looks like she was right. I cried on the phone with this stranger, cried because Miss Dot had believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself, cried because she'd seen a future I couldn't see, cried because her love had been patient enough to wait 12 years to save me. The niece said, "She left you that money because she trusted you to do good with it. She knew you'd honor her memory. She knew you'd help people the way she always tried to help people." I promised her I would. I promised I'd keep Miss Dot's legacy alive. I promised I'd make sure her sacrifices meant something. I'm working on expanding the foundation now. We want to offer more services. Financial counseling, job training, legal clinics, everything women need to not just escape, but rebuild. It's slow work, exhausting work, but it's the most meaningful thing I've ever done. Every woman we help is Miss Dot's legacy continuing. Every life we save is proof that her love didn't die with her. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about the years I wasted in that marriage, if I regret not leaving sooner, if I wish I'd found the money earlier. The truth is, I don't know. Maybe I needed to go through what I went through to understand what I understand now. Maybe I needed to be broken down to that desperate point to truly appreciate being saved. Maybe the timing was exactly right, even though it felt so wrong. What I do know is that I'm grateful. Grateful for Miss Dot's love. Grateful for the life I have now. Grateful for the chance to help other women the way I was helped. I've been reading about economic abuse lately, trying to understand the scope of the problem. The statistics are devastating. Research reveals that only 1 in 20 cases of physical abuse is reported, and economic abuse is even less visible, even less acknowledged. Women stay because they have no financial options, because their credit is destroyed, because they don't see a way out, and the systems that are supposed to help often fail them. Studies reveal that only 16% of police officers received adequate training on elder abuse, and that number is even lower for economic abuse. The people who should protect us often don't recognize what's happening, don't understand how money can be weaponized, how financial control can be as devastating as physical violence. That's what I want people to understand. That abuse isn't always bruises you can see. Sometimes it's empty bank accounts and ruined credit and debt you didn't create. Sometimes it's being told you don't understand money while someone systematically destroys your financial future. Sometimes it's being trapped by numbers on a page that say you have no options. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, please hear me. You're not crazy. You're not stupid. You're not bad with money. If someone is controlling your finances, hiding accounts, taking out debt in your name, that's abuse. That's a crime. And you deserve help. Document everything, secretly if you have to. Take photos of statements, screenshot bank accounts, save emails and texts. Build a case even if you don't know what you'll need it for yet. Reach out to domestic violence hotlines even if you've never been hit, to financial counseling services, to legal aid, to anyone who might help. You're not alone even when you feel completely isolated. And if you can, start building your own security. A secret bank account. Cash hidden where it can't be found. Important documents in a safe deposit box. Whatever you can do to create options for yourself. The foundation I started, the Dorothy Chambers Freedom Fund, we're here. We help women across the country escape financially abusive situations. We provide emergency grants, no questions asked. If you need help, we want to help you. You can find us online. You can call. You don't have to stay trapped. I'm sitting in my house right now, the one I bought with my own money and my own name, and I'm looking at Miss Dot's quilt, folded at the foot of my bed. In a few hours, I have a board meeting for the foundation. Tomorrow, I have classes. This weekend, I'm interviewing grant applicants. My life is full in ways I never imagined possible. Not because of the money, though that helps, but because I'm living with purpose now, because I'm honoring the love someone showed me, because I'm turning my pain into something that helps others. I still miss her. 12 years gone, and I still miss her every single day. I miss her laugh. I miss her wisdom. I miss the way she saw me clearly when I couldn't see myself at all. But I also feel her presence constantly, in the work I do, in the women we help, in the legacy that keeps growing and spreading and touching lives she never met. She's not really gone. She lives in every woman who escapes because of the resources she provided. She lives in every life that starts over because she planned ahead. She lives in me. That's what I want you to take from this story. That love doesn't end with death. That protection can reach across years and save us when we need it most. That the people who truly love us prepare for our future even when they won't be there to see it. Miss Dot died in a rented room with almost nothing to her name. But she left me everything that mattered. She left me freedom. She left me security. She left me proof that I was loved enough to be protected from a future she couldn't control. And now, I get to pass that forward. I get to be the person who saves someone else. I get to be the answer to prayers women pray when everything seems impossible. That's the legacy. Not the money. Not the numbers in a bank account. The legacy is love in action. The legacy is protection that outlasts death. The legacy is one life touching another and another and another, spreading out in circles that never end. So if you're struggling right now, if you're trapped in a situation that feels hopeless, if you can't see a way forward, please remember my story. Remember that salvation can come from unexpected places. Remember that someone, somewhere, might be preparing a way out for you even if you don't know it yet. Remember that you deserve to be free. And if you're in a position to help, if you have resources or skills or time, please consider using them to protect someone who needs it. Set something aside for a young person who might need options someday. Support organizations that help vulnerable people. Be someone's Miss Dot. Be the love that reaches across time and saves a life. Before we end, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? What brought you to this story? Have you experienced something similar? Do you know someone who needs to hear this? Leave a comment and tell me. Tell me your story. Tell me what resonated. Tell me how I can help. Because this isn't just my story anymore. It's ours. Every person who's been trapped and found freedom. Every person who's been loved enough to be protected. Every person who's still searching for a way out. And if this story meant something to you, if it gave you hope or clarity or understanding, please share it. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Help me reach other people who need to hear that they're not alone. That they're not crazy. That they deserve better. Because that's what Miss Dot taught me. That we save each other. That love is practical and active, and sometimes it waits 12 years to reveal itself. But it never stops protecting. That we're all connected by the care we show each other, especially when it costs us something. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about a story about an ordinary woman who did something extraordinary with very little. Sleep well under your quilts tonight, And remember that somewhere, someone loves you enough to have prepared a way forward, even if you can't see it yet.